Welcome to The Winner's Voice, where timeless books inspire powerful minds and lasting success. Today, we begin pushing to the front Orison Swett Marden's, a classic work filled with powerful ideas on mindset, growth, and success. This is Part 3. Let's begin. Chapter 9. Round Boys in Square Holes. The high prize of life, the crowning fortune of a man, is to be born with a bias to some pursuit, which finds him in employment and happiness. Emerson. There is hardly a poet, artist, philosopher, or man of science mentioned in the history of the human intellect, whose genius was not opposed by parents, guardians, or teachers. In these cases nature seems to have triumphed by direct interposition, to have insisted on her darlings having their rights, and encouraged disobedience, secrecy, falsehood, even flight from home and occasional vagabondism, rather than the world should lose what it cost her so much pains to produce. P. Whipple. I hear a voice you cannot hear, which says, I must not stay. I see a hand you cannot see, which beckons me away. Tickle. James Watt, I never saw such an idle young fellow as you are, said his grandmother. Do take a book and employ yourself usefully. For the last half-hour you have not spoken a single word. Do you know what you have been doing all this time? Why, you have taken off and replaced, and taken off again, the teapot lid, and you have held alternately in the steam, first a saucer and then a spoon, and you have busied yourself in examining and collecting together the little drops formed by the condensation of the steam on the surface of the china and the silver. Now, are you not ashamed to waste your time in this disgraceful manner? The world has certainly gained much through the old lady's failure to tell James how he could employ his time to better advantage. But I'm good for something, pleaded a young man whom a merchant was about to discharge for his bluntness. You are good for nothing as a salesman, said his employer. I am sure I can be useful, said the youth. How? Tell me how. I don't know, sir, I don't know. Nor do I, said the merchant, laughing at the earnestness of his clerk. Only don't put me away, sir, don't put me away. Try me at something besides selling. I cannot sell. I know I cannot sell. I know that too, said the principal. That is what is wrong. But I can make myself useful somehow, persisted the young man. I know I can. He was placed in the counting-house, where his aptitude for figures soon showed itself, and in a few years he became not only chief cashier in the large store, but an eminent accountant. You cannot look into a cradle and read the secret message traced by a divine hand and wrapped up in that bit of clay, any more than you can see the North Star in the magnetic needle. God has loaded the needle of that young life so it will point to the star of its own destiny, and though you may pull it around by artificial advice and unnatural education, and compel it to point to the star which presides over poetry, art, law, medicine, or whatever your own pet calling is until you have wasted years of a precious life, yet, when once free, the needle flies back to its own star. Rue it as he may, repent it as he often does, says Robert Waters. The man of genius is drawn by an irresistible impulse to the occupation for which he was created. No matter by what difficulty surrounded, no matter how unpromising the prospect, this occupation is the only one which he will pursue with interest and pleasure. When his efforts fail to procure means of subsistence, and he find himself poor and neglected, he may, like Burns, often look back with a sigh and think how much better off he would be had he pursued some other occupation, but he will stick to his favorite pursuit nevertheless. Civilization will mark its highest tide when every man has chosen his proper work. No man can be ideally successful until he has found his place. Like a locomotive, he is strong on the track, but weak anywhere else. Like a boat on a river, says Emerson, every boy runs against obstructions on every side but one. On that side all obstruction is taken away, and he sweeps serenely over a deepening channel into an infinite sea. Only a Dickens can write the history of boy slavery, of boys whose aspirations and longings have been silenced forever by ignorant parents, of boys persecuted as lazy, stupid, or fickle, simply because they were out of their places, of square boys forced into round holes, and oppressed because they did not fit, of boys compelled to pore over dry theological books when the voice within continually cried, law, medicine, art, science, or business, of boys tortured because they were not enthusiastic in employments which they loathed, and against which every fiber of their being was uttering perpetual protest. It is often a narrow selfishness in a father which leads him to wish his son a reproduction of himself. You are trying to make that boy another you. One is enough, said Emerson. John Jacob Astor's father wished his son to be his successor as a butcher, but the instinct of commercial enterprise was too strong in the future merchant. Nature never duplicates men. She breaks the pattern at every birth. The magic combination is never used but once. Frederick the Great was terribly abused because he had a passion for art and music and did not care for military drill. His father hated the fine arts and imprisoned him. He even contemplated killing his son, but his own death placed Frederick on the throne at the age of 28. This boy, who, because he loved art and music, was thought good for nothing, made Prussia one of the greatest nations of Europe. How stupid and clumsy is the blinking eagle at perch, but how keen his glance, how steady and true his curves, when turning his powerful wing against the clear blue sky. Ignorant parents compelled the boy Arkwright to become a barber's apprentice, but nature had locked up in his brain a cunning device destined to bless humanity and to do the drudgery of millions of England's poor. So he must needs say, "Hands off," even to his parents, as Christ said to his mother, "Wist ye not that I must be about my Father's business?" Galileo was set apart for a physician, but when compelled to study anatomy and physiology, he would hide his Euclid and Archimedes and stealthily work out the abstruse problems. He was only 18 when he discovered the principle of the pendulum in a lamp left swinging in the cathedral at Pisa. He invented both the microscope and telescope, enlarging knowledge of the vast and minute alike. The parents of Michelangelo had declared that no son of theirs should ever follow the discreditable profession of an artist, and even punished him for covering the walls and furniture with sketches, but the fire burning in his breast was kindled by the divine artist, and would not let him rest until he had immortalized himself in the architecture of St. Peter's, in the marble of his Moses, and on the walls of the Sistine Chapel. Pascal's father determined that his son should teach the dead languages, but the voice of mathematics drowned every other call, haunting the boy until he laid aside his grammar for Euclid. The father of Joshua Reynolds rebuked his son for drawing pictures, and wrote on one, "Done by Joshua out of pure idleness." Yet this idle boy became one of the founders of the Royal Academy. Turner was intended for a barber in Maiden Lane, but became the greatest landscape painter of modern times. Claude Lorraine, the painter, was apprenticed to a pastry cook, Molière, the author, to an upholsterer, and Guido, the famous painter of Aurora, was sent to a music school. Schiller was sent to study surgery in the military school at Stuttgart, but in secret he produced his first play, The Robbers, the first performance of which he had to witness in disguise. The irksomeness of his prison-like school so galled him, and his longing for authorship so allured him, that he ventured, penniless, into the inhospitable world of letters. A kind lady aided him, and soon he produced the two splendid dramas which made him immortal. The physician Handel wished his son to become a lawyer, and so tried to discourage his fondness for music. But the boy got an old spinet and practiced on it secretly in a hayloft. When the doctor visited a brother in the service of the Duke of Weissenfels, he took his son with him. The boy wandered unobserved to the organ in a chapel, and soon had a private concert under full blast. The Duke happened to hear the performance, and wondered who could possibly combine so much melody with so much evident unfamiliarity with the instrument. The boy was brought before him, and the Duke, instead of blaming him for disturbing the organ, praised his performance, and persuaded Dr. Handel to let his son follow his bent. Daniel Defoe had been a trader, a soldier, a merchant, a secretary, a factory manager, a commissioner's accountant, an envoy, and an author of several indifferent books, before he wrote his masterpiece, Robinson Crusoe. Wilson, the ornithologist, failed in 5 different professions before he found his place. Erskine spent 4 years in the Navy, and then, in the hope of more rapid promotion, joined the army. After serving more than 2 years, he one day, out of curiosity, attended a court in the town where his regiment was quartered. The presiding judge, an acquaintance, invited Erskine to sit near him, and said that the pleaders at the bar were among the most eminent lawyers of Great Britain. Erskine took their measure as they spoke, and believed he could excel them. He at once began the study of law, in which he eventually soon stood alone as the greatest forensic orator of his country. Stuart studied for the ministry, and became a teacher, before he drifted into his proper calling as a merchant, through the accident of having lent money to a friend. The latter, with failure imminent, insisted that his creditor should take the shop as the only means of securing the money. "Jonathan," said Mr. Chase, when his son told of having nearly fitted himself for college, "thou shalt go down to the machine shop on Monday morning." It was many years before Jonathan escaped from the shop, to work his way up to the position of a man of great influence as a United States Senator from Rhode Island. It has been well said that if God should commission 2 angels, one to sweep a street crossing, and the other to rule an empire, they could not be induced to exchange callings. Not less true is it that he who feels that God has given him a particular work to do can be happy only when earnestly engaged in its performance. Happy the youth who finds the place which his dreams have pictured. If he does not fill that place, he will not fill any to the satisfaction of himself or others. Nature never lets a man rest until he has found his place. She haunts him and drives him until all his faculties give their consent and he falls into his proper niche. A parent might just as well decide that the magnetic needle will point to Venus or Jupiter without trying it, as to decide what profession his son shall adopt. What a ridiculous exhibition a great truck horse would make on the racetrack! Yet this is no more incongruous than the popular idea that law, medicine, and theology are the only desirable professions. How ridiculous, too, for 52% of our American college graduates to study law. How many young men become poor clergymen by trying to imitate their fathers who were good ones, of poor doctors and lawyers for the same reason. The country is full of men who are out of place, disappointed, soured, ruined, out of office, out of money, out of credit, out of courage, out at elbows, out in the cold. The fact is, nearly every college graduate who succeeds in the true sense of the word prepares himself in school, but makes himself after he is graduated. The best thing his teachers have taught him is how to study. The moment he is beyond the college walls, he ceases to use books and helps which do not feed him, and seizes upon those that do. Ulysses S. Grant. We must not jump to the conclusion that because a man has not succeeded in what he has really tried to do with all his might, he cannot succeed at anything. Look at a fish floundering on the sand as though he would tear himself to pieces. But look again, a huge wave breaks higher up the beach and covers the unfortunate creature. The moment his fins feel the water, he is himself again, and darts like a flash through the waves. His fins mean something now, while before they beat the air and earth in vain, a hindrance instead of a help. If you fail after doing your level best, examine the work attempted, and see if it really be in the line of your bent or power of achievement. Cooper failed as a lawyer. He was so timid that he could not plead a case, but he wrote some of our finest poems. Molière found that he was not adapted to the work of a lawyer, but he left a great name in literature. Voltaire and Petrarch abandoned the law, the former choosing philosophy, the latter, poetry. Cromwell was a farmer until 40 years old. Very few of us, before we reach our teens, show great genius or even remarkable talent for any line of work or study. The great majority of boys and girls, even when given all the latitude and longitude heart could desire, find it very difficult before their 15th or even before their 20th year to decide what to do for a living. Each knocks at the portals of the mind, demanding a wonderful aptitude for some definite line of work, but it is not there. That is no reason why the duty at hand should be put off, or why the labor that naturally falls to one's lot should not be done well. Samuel Smiles was trained to a profession which was not to his taste, yet he practiced it so faithfully that it helped him to authorship, for which he was well fitted. Fidelity to the work or everyday duties at hand, and a genuine feeling of responsibility to our parents or employers, ourselves, and our God, will eventually bring most of us into the right niches at the proper time. Garfield would not have become president if he had not previously been a zealous teacher, a responsible soldier, a conscientious statesman. Neither Lincoln nor Grant started as a baby with a precocity for the White House, or an irresistible genius for ruling men. So no one should be disappointed because he was not endowed with tremendous gifts in the cradle. His business is to do the best he can wherever his lot may be cast, and advance at every honorable opportunity in the direction towards which the inward monitor points. Let duty be the guiding star, and success will surely be the crown, to the full measure of one's ability and industry. What career? What shall my life's work be? If instinct and heart ask for carpentry, be a carpenter; if for medicine, be a physician. With a firm choice and earnest work, a young man or woman cannot help but succeed. But if there be no instinct, or if it be weak or faint, one should choose cautiously along the line of his best adaptability and opportunity. No one need doubt that the world has use for him. True success lies in acting well your part, and this everyone can do. Better be a first-rate hod-carrier than a second-rate anything. The world has been very kind to many who were once known as dunces or blockheads, after they have become very successful, but it was very cross to them while they were struggling through discouragement and misinterpretation. Give every boy and girl a fair chance and reasonable encouragement, and do not condemn them because of even a large degree of downright stupidity, for many so-called good-for-nothing boys, blockheads, numbskulls, dullards, or dunces, were only boys out of their places, round boys forced into square holes. Wellington was considered a dunce by his mother. At Eton he was called dull, idle, slow, and was about the last boy in school of whom anything was expected. He showed no talent, and had no desire to enter the army. His industry and perseverance were his only redeeming characteristics in the eyes of his parents and teachers. But at 46 he had defeated the greatest general living, except himself. Goldsmith was the laughingstock of his schoolmasters. He was graduated wooden spoon, a college name for a dunce. He tried to enter a class in surgery, but was rejected. He was driven to literature. Goldsmith found himself totally unfit for the duties of a physician, but who else could have written The Vicar of Wakefield or The Deserted Village? Dr. Johnson found him very poor and about to be arrested for debt. He made Goldsmith give him the manuscript of The Vicar of Wakefield, sold it to the publishers, and paid the debt. This manuscript made its author famous. Robert Clive bore the name of dunce and reprobate at school, but at 32, with 3,000 men, he defeated 50,000 at Plassey and laid the foundation of the British Empire in India. Sir Walter Scott was called a blockhead by his teacher. When Byron happened to get ahead of his class, the master would say, "Now, Geordie, let me see how soon you will be at the foot again." Young Linnaeus was called by his teachers almost a blockhead. Not finding him fit for the church, his parents sent him to college to study medicine. But the silent teacher within, greater and wiser than all others, led him to the fields, and neither sickness, misfortune, nor poverty could drive him from the study of botany, the choice of his heart, and he became the greatest botanist of his age. Richard B. Sheridan's mother tried in vain to teach him the most elementary studies. The mother's death aroused slumbering talents, as has happened in hundreds of cases, and he became one of the most brilliant men of his age. Samuel Drew was one of the dullest and most listless boys in his neighborhood, yet after an accident by which he nearly lost his life, and after the death of his brother, he became so studious and industrious that he could not bear to lose a moment. He read at every meal, using all the time he could get for self-improvement. He said that Paine's Age of Reason made him an author, for it was by his attempt to refute its arguments that he was first known as a strong, vigorous writer. It has been well said that no man ever made an ill figure who understood his own talents, nor a good one who mistook them. Chapter 10. What career? Brutes find out where their talents lie. A bear will not attempt to fly. A foundered horse will oft debate before he tries a 5-barred gate. A dog by instinct turns aside, who sees the ditch too deep and wide. But man we find the only creature, who, led by folly, combats nature. Who, when she loudly cries, "Forbear!" with obstinacy fixes there, and where his genius least inclines, absurdly bends his whole designs. Swift. The crowning fortune of a man is to be born to some pursuit which finds him in employment and happiness, whether it be to make baskets, or broadswords, or canals, or statues, or songs. Emerson. Whatever you are by nature, keep to it, never desert your line of talent. Be what nature intended you for, and you will succeed. Be anything else, and you will be 10,000 times worse than nothing. Sidney Smith. Every man has got a fort, said Artemus Ward. It's some men's fort to do one thing, and some other men's fort to do another, while there is numerous shiftless critters goin' round loose whose fort is not to do nothin'. Twice I've endeavored to do things which they wasn't my fort. The first time was when I undertook to lick a Outish's cuss who cut a hole in my tent and crawled through. Says I, "My gentle sir, go out, or I shall fall onto you putty heavy." Says he, "Wade in, old wax figures," whereupon I went for him, but he caught me powerful on the head and knocked me through the tent into a cow pasture. He pursued the attack and flung me into a mud puddle. As I arose and wrung out my drenched garments, I concluded fittin' was ent my fort. I'll now rise the curtain upon scene second. It is rarely seldom that I seek consolation in the flowin' bowl. But in a certain town in Ingiany in the fall of 18, my organ grinder got sick with a fever and died. I never felt so ashamed in my life, and I thought I'd hissed in a few swallers of soothin' strengthenin'. Consequence was, I hissted so much I didn't exactly know whereabouts I was. I turned my livin' wild beasts of prey loose into the streets, and split all my waxworks. I then bet I could play hoss. So I hitched myself to a canal boat, there bein' 2 other hosses behind and another ahead of me. But the hosses bein', honest to such a arrangement, begun to kick and squeal and rear up. Consequence was, I was kicked violently in the stomach and back, and presently I found myself in the canal with the other hosses, keekin' and yellin' like a tribe of Tuscarora savages. I was rescood, and as I was bein' carried to the tavern on a hemlock board, I said in a feeble voice, "Boys, playin' hoss isn't my fort." Moral: never don't do nothin' which isn't your fort, for ef you do you'll find yourself splashin' round in the canal, figuratively speakin'. The following advertisement, which appeared day after day in a Western paper, did not bring a single reply. Wanted, situation by a practical printer, who is competent to take charge of any department in a printing and publishing house. Would accept a professorship in any of the academies. Has no objection to teach ornamental painting and penmanship, geometry, trigonometry, and many other sciences. Has had some experience as a lay preacher. Would have no objection to form a small class of young ladies and gentlemen to instruct them in the higher branches. To a dentist or chiropodist he would be invaluable, or he would cheerfully accept a position as bass or tenor singer in a choir. At length there appeared this addition to the notice. P.S. Will accept an offer to saw and split wood at less than the usual rates. This secured a situation at once, and the advertisement was seen no more. Your talent is your call. Your legitimate destiny speaks in your character. If you have found your place, your occupation has the consent of every faculty of your being. If possible, choose that occupation which focuses the largest amount of your experience and tastes. You will then not only have a congenial vocation, but also will utilize largely your skill and business knowledge, which is your true capital. Follow your bent. You cannot long fight successfully against your aspirations. Parents, friends, or misfortune may stifle and suppress the longings of the heart by compelling you to perform unwelcome tasks. But, like a volcano, the inner fire will burst the crusts which confine it and will pour forth its pent-up genius in eloquence, in song, in art, or in some favorite industry. Beware of a talent which you cannot hope to practice in perfection. Nature hates all botched and half-finished work, and will pronounce her curse upon it. Better be the Napoleon of bootblacks, or the Alexander of chimney-sweeps, let us say with Matthew Arnold, than a shallow-brained attorney who, like necessity, knows no law. Half the world seems to have found uncongenial occupation, as though the human race had been shaken up together and exchanged places in the operation. A servant girl is trying to teach, and a natural teacher is tending store. Good farmers are murdering the law, while Choates and Websters are running down farms, each tortured by the consciousness of unfulfilled destiny. Boys are pining in factories who should be wrestling with Greek and Latin, and hundreds are chafing beneath unnatural loads in college who should be on the farm or before the mast. Artists are spreading daubs on canvas who should be whitewashing board fences. Behind counters stand clerks who hate the yardstick and neglect their work to dream of other occupations. A good shoemaker writes a few verses for the village paper. His friends call him a poet, and the last, with which he is familiar, is abandoned for the pen, which he uses awkwardly. Other shoemakers are cobbling in Congress, while statesmen are pounding shoe lasts. Laymen are murdering sermons while Beechers and Whitefields are failing as merchants, and people are wondering what can be the cause of empty pews. A boy who is always making something with tools is railroaded through the university and started on the road to inferiority in one of the 3 honorable professions. Real surgeons are handling the meat saw and cleaver, while butchers are amputating human limbs. How fortunate that there's a divinity that shapes our ends. Rough hew them how we will. He that hath a trade, says Franklin, hath an estate, and he that hath a calling hath a place of profit and honor. A plowman on his legs is higher than a gentleman on his knees. A man's business does more to make him than anything else. It hardens his muscles, strengthens his body, quickens his blood, sharpens his mind, corrects his judgment, wakes up his inventive genius, puts his wits to work, starts him on the race of life, arouses his ambition, makes him feel that he is a man and must fill a man's shoes, do a man's work, bear a man's part in life, and show himself a man in that part. No man feels himself a man who is not doing a man's business. A man without employment is not a man. He does not prove by his works that he is a man. 150 pounds of bone and muscle do not make a man. A good cranium full of brains is not a man. The bone and muscle and brain must know how to do a man's work, think a man's thoughts, mark out a man's path, and bear a man's weight of character and duty before they constitute a man. Go-attentiveness is the first requisite for success. Stick-to-itiveness is the second. Under ordinary circumstances, and with practical common sense to guide him, one who has these requisites will not fail. Don't wait for a higher position or a larger salary. Enlarge the position you already occupy. Put originality of method into it. Fill it as it never was filled before. Be more prompt, more energetic, more thorough, more polite than your predecessor or fellow workman. Study your business, devise new modes of operation, be able to give your employer points. The art lies not in giving satisfaction merely, not in simply filling your place, but in doing better than was expected, in surprising your employer, and the reward will be a better place and a larger salary. When out of work, take the first respectable job that offers, heeding not the disproportion between your faculties and your task. If you put your manhood into your labor, you will soon be given something better to do. This question of a right aim in life has become exceedingly perplexing in our complicated age. It is not a difficult problem to solve when one is the son of a Zulu or the daughter of a Bedouin. The condition of the savage hardly admits of but one choice, but as one rises higher in the scale of civilization and creeps nearer to the great centers of activity, the difficulty of a correct decision increases with its importance. In proportion as one is hard-pressed in competition, is it of the sternest necessity for him to choose the right aim, so as to be able to throw the whole of his energy and enthusiasm into the struggle for success. The dissipation of strength or hope is fatal to prosperity even in the most attractive field. Gladstone says there is a limit to the work that can be got out of a human body or a human brain, and he is a wise man who wastes no energy on pursuits for which he is not fitted. Blessed is he who has found his work, says Carlyle. Let him ask no other blessedness. He has a work, a life purpose. He has found it and will follow it. In choosing an occupation, do not ask yourself how you can make the most money or gain the most notoriety, but choose that work which will call out all your powers and develop your manhood into the greatest strength and symmetry. Not money, not notoriety, not fame even, but power is what you want. Manhood is greater than wealth, grander than fame. Character is greater than any career. Each faculty must be educated, and any deficiency in its training will appear in whatever you do. The hand must be educated to be graceful, steady, and strong. The eye must be educated to be alert, discriminating, and microscopic. The heart must be educated to be tender, sympathetic, and true. The memory must be drilled for years in accuracy, retention, and comprehensiveness. The world does not demand that you be a lawyer, minister, doctor, farmer, scientist, or merchant. It does not dictate what you shall do, but it does require that you be a master in whatever you undertake. If you are a master in your line, the world will applaud you and all doors will fly open to you. But it condemns all botches, abortions, and failures. Whoever is well educated to discharge the duty of a man, says Rousseau, cannot be badly prepared to fill any of those offices that have relation to him. It matters little to me whether my pupils be designed for the army, the pulpit, or the bar. Nature has destined us to the offices of human life antecedent to our destination concerning society. To live is the profession I would teach him. When I have done with him, it is true he will be neither a soldier, a lawyer, nor a divine. Let him first be a man. Fortune may remove him from one rank to another as she pleases. He will be always found in his place. In the great race of life common sense has the right of way. Wealth, a diploma, a pedigree, talent, genius, without tact and common sense, cut but a small figure. The incapables and the impracticables, though loaded with diplomas and degrees, are left behind. Not what do you know or who are you, but what are you, what can you do, is the interrogation of the century. George Herbert has well said, "What we are is much more to us than what we do." An aim that carries in it the least element of doubt as to its justice or honor or right should be abandoned at once. The art of dishing up the wrong so as to make it look and taste like the right has never been more extensively cultivated than in our day. It is a curious fact that reason will, on pressure, overcome a man's instinct of right. An eminent scientist has said that a man could soon reason himself out of the instinct of decency if he would only take pains and work hard enough. So when a doubtful but attractive future is placed before one, there is a great temptation to juggle with the wrong until it seems the right. Yet any aim that is immoral carries in itself the germ of certain failure, in the real sense of the word, failure that is physical and spiritual. There is no doubt that every person has a special adaptation for his own peculiar part in life. A very few, geniuses we call them, have this marked in an unusual degree and very early in life. Madame de Staël was engrossed in political philosophy at an age when other girls are dressing dolls. Mozart, when but 4 years old, played the clavichord and composed minuets and other pieces still extant. The little Chalmers, with solemn air and earnest gestures, would preach often from a stool in the nursery. Goethe wrote tragedies at 12, and Grotius published an able philosophical work before he was 15. Pope lisped in numbers. Chatterton wrote good poems at 11, and Cowley published a volume of poetry in his 16th year. Thomas Lawrence and Benjamin West drew likenesses almost as soon as they could walk. Liszt played in public at 12. Canova made models in clay while a mere child. Bacon exposed the defects of Aristotle's philosophy when but 16. Napoleon was at the head of armies when throwing snowballs at Brienne. All these showed their bent while young, and followed it in active life. But precocity is not common, and, except in rare cases, we must discover the bias in our natures, and not wait for the proclivity to make itself manifest. When found, it is worth more to us than a vein of gold. "I do not forbid you to preach," said a bishop to a young clergyman, "but nature does." Lowell said, "It is the vain endeavor to make ourselves what we are not that has strewn history with so many broken purposes, and lives left in the rough. You have not found your place until all your faculties are roused, and your whole nature consents and approves of the work you are doing, not until you are so enthusiastic in it that you take it to bed with you. You may be forced to drudge at uncongenial toil for a time, but emancipate yourself as soon as possible." Carey, the consecrated cobbler, before he went as a missionary, said, "My business is to preach the gospel. I cobble shoes to pay expenses." If your vocation be only a humble one, elevate it with more manhood than others put into it. Put into it brains and heart and energy and economy. Broaden it by originality of methods. Extend it by enterprise and industry. Study it as you would a profession. Learn everything that is to be known about it. Concentrate your faculties upon it, for the greatest achievements are reserved for the man of single aim, in whom no rival powers divide the empire of the soul. Better adorn your own than seek another's place. Go to the bottom of your business if you would climb to the top. Nothing is small which concerns your business. Master every detail. This was the secret of A.T. Stewart's and of John Jacob Astor's great success. They knew everything about their business. As love is the only excuse for marriage, and the only thing which will carry one safely through the troubles and vexations of married life, so love for an occupation is the only thing which will carry one safely and surely through the troubles which overwhelm 95 out of every 100 who choose the life of a merchant, and very many in every other career. A famous Englishman said to his nephew, "Don't choose medicine, for we have never had a murderer in our family, and the chances are that in your ignorance you may kill a patient. As to the law, no prudent man is willing to risk his life or his fortune to a young lawyer, who has not only no experience, but is generally too conceited to know the risks he incurs for his client, who alone is the loser. Therefore, as the mistakes of a clergyman in doctrine or advice to his parishioners cannot be clearly determined in this world, I advise you by all means to enter the church." "I felt that I was in the world to do something, and thought I must," said Whittier, thus giving the secret of his great power. It is the man who must enter law, literature, medicine, the ministry, or any other of the overstocked professions, who will succeed. His certain call, that is his love for it, and his fidelity to it, are the imperious factors of his career. If a man enters a profession simply because his grandfather made a great name in it, or his mother wants him to, with no love or adaptability for it, it were far better for him to be a motorman on an electric car at $1.75 a day. In the humbler work his intelligence may make him a leader. In the other career he might do as much harm as a boulder rolled from its place upon a railroad track, a menace to the next express. Only a few years ago marriage was the only sphere open to girls, and the single woman had to face the disapproval of her friends. Lessing said, "The woman who thinks is like a man who puts on rouge, ridiculous." Not many years have elapsed since the ambitious woman who ventured to study or write would keep a bit of embroidery at hand to throw over her book or manuscript when callers entered. Dr. Gregory said to his daughters, "If you happen to have any learning, keep it a profound secret from the men, who generally look with a jealous and malignant eye on a woman of great parts and a cultivated understanding." Women who wrote books in those days would deny the charge as though a public disgrace. All this has changed, and what a change it is! As Francis Willard said, the greatest discovery of the century is the discovery of woman. We have emancipated her, and are opening countless opportunities for our girls outside of marriage. Formerly, only a boy could choose a career. Now his sister can do the same. This freedom is one of the greatest glories of the 20th century. But with freedom comes responsibility, and under these changed conditions every girl should have a definite aim. Dr. Hall says that the world has urgent need of girls who are mother's right hand, girls who can cuddle the little ones next best to mama, and smooth out the tangles in the domestic skein when things get twisted, girls whom father takes comfort in for something better than beauty, and the big brothers are proud of for something that outranks the ability to dance or shine in society. Next, we want girls of sense, girls who have a standard of their own, regardless of conventionalities, and are independent enough to live up to it. Girls who simply won't wear a trailing dress on the street to gather up microbes and all sorts of defilement. Girls who don't wear a high hat to the theater or lacerate their feet and endanger their health with high heels and corsets. Girls who will wear what is pretty and becoming and snap their fingers at the dictates of fashion when fashion is horrid and silly. And we want good girls, girls who are sweet, right straight out from the heart to the lips, innocent and pure and simple girls, with less knowledge of sin and duplicity and evil-doing at 20 than the pert little schoolgirl of 10 has all too often. And we want careful girls and prudent girls, who think enough of the generous father who toils to maintain them in comfort, and of the gentle mother who denies herself much that they may have so many pretty things, to count the cost and draw the line between the essentials and non-essentials, girls who strive to save and not to spend, girls who are unselfish and eager to be a joy and a comfort in the home rather than an expense and a useless burden. We want girls with hearts, girls who are full of tenderness and sympathy, with tears that flow for other people's ills, and smiles that light outward their own beautiful thoughts. We have lots of clever girls, and brilliant girls, and witty girls. Give us a consignment of jolly girls, warm-hearted and impulsive girls, kind and entertaining to their own folks, and with little desire to shine in the garish world. With a few such girls scattered around, life would freshen up for all of us, as the weather does under the spell of summer showers. They talk about a woman's sphere, as though it had a limit. There's not a place in earth or heaven. There's not a task to mankind given. There's not a blessing or a woe. There's not a whisper, yes or no. There's not a life, or death, or birth, that has a feather's weight of worth, without a woman in it. Do that which is assigned you, says Emerson, and you cannot hope too much or dare too much. There is at this moment for you an utterance brave and grand as that of the colossal chisel of Phidias, or trowel of the Egyptians, or the pen of Moses or Dante, but different from all these. The best way for a young man to begin, who is without friends or influence, said Russell Sage, is, first, by getting a position, second, keeping his mouth shut, third, observing, fourth, being faithful, fifth, making his employer think he would be lost in a fog without him, and sixth, being polite. Close application, integrity, attention to details, discreet advertising, are given as the 4 steps to success by John Wanamaker, whose motto is, do the next thing. Whatever you do in life, be greater than your calling. Most people look upon an occupation or calling as a mere expedient for earning a living. What a mean, narrow view to take of what was intended for the great school of life, the great man-developer, the character-builder, that which should broaden, deepen, heighten, and round out into symmetry, harmony, and beauty all the God-given faculties within us. How we shrink from the task and evade the lessons which were intended for the unfolding of life's great possibilities into usefulness and power, as the sun unfolds into beauty and fragrance the petals of the flower. I am glad to think I am not bound to make the world go round, but only to discover and to do, with cheerful heart, the work that God appoints. Jean Ingelow. What shall I do to be forever known? Thy duty ever. This did full many who yet sleep all unknown. Oh, never, never. Think'st thou, perchance, that they remain unknown, whom thou know'st not? By angel trumps in heaven their praise is blown. Divine their lot. Chapter 11. Choosing a vocation. Be what nature intended you for, and you will succeed. Be anything else, and you will be 10,000 times worse than nothing. Sidney Smith. Many a man pays for his success with a slice of his constitution. No man struggles perpetually and victoriously against his own character, and one of the first principles of success in life is so to regulate our career as rather to turn our physical constitution and natural inclinations to good account than to endeavor to counteract the one or oppose the other. Bulwer. He that hath a trade hath an estate. Franklin. Nature fits all her children with something to do. Lowell. As occupations and professions have a powerful influence upon the length of human life, the youth should first ascertain whether the vocation he thinks of choosing is a healthy one. Statesmen, judges, and clergymen are noted for their longevity. They are not swept into the great business vortex, where the friction and raspings of sharp competition whittle life away at a fearful rate. Astronomers, who contemplate vast systems, moving through enormous distances, are exceptionally long-lived, as Herschel and Humboldt. Philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians, as Galileo, Bacon, Newton, Euler, Dalton, in fact, those who have dwelt upon the exact sciences, seem to have escaped many of the ills from which humanity suffers. Great students of natural history have also, as a rule, lived long and happy lives. Of 14 members of a noted historical society in England, who died in 1870, 2 were over 90, 5 over 80, and 2 over 70. The occupation of the mind has a great influence upon the health of the body. There is no employment so dangerous and destructive to life, but plenty of human beings can be found to engage in it. Of all the instances that can be given of recklessness of life, there is none which exceeds that of the workmen employed in what is called dry-pointing, the grinding of needles and of table forks. The fine steel dust which they breathe brings on a painful disease, of which they are almost sure to die before they are 40. Yet not only are men tempted by high wages to engage in this employment, but they resist to the utmost all contrivances devised for diminishing the danger, through fear that such things would cause more workmen to offer themselves and thus lower wages. Many physicians have investigated the effects of work in the numerous match factories in France upon the health of the employees, and all agree that rapid destruction of the teeth, decay or necrosis of the jawbone, bronchitis, and other diseases result. We will probably find more old men on farms than elsewhere. There are many reasons why farmers should live longer than persons residing in cities or than those engaged in other occupations. Aside from the purer air, the outdoor exercise, both conducive to a good appetite and sound sleep, which comparatively few in cities enjoy, they are free from the friction, harassing cares, anxieties, and the keen competition incident to city life. On the other hand, there are some great drawbacks and some enemies to longevity, even on the farm. Man does not live by bread alone. The mind is by far the greatest factor in maintaining the body in a healthy condition. The social life of the city, the great opportunities afforded the mind for feeding upon libraries and lectures, great sermons, and constant association with other minds, the great variety of amusements compensate largely for the loss of many of the advantages of farm life. In spite of the great temperance and immunity from things which corrode, whittle, and rasp away life in the cities, farmers in many places do not live so long as scientists and some other professional men. There is no doubt that aspiration and success tend to prolong life. Prosperity tends to longevity, if we do not wear life away or burn it out in the feverish pursuit of wealth. Thomas W. Higginson made a list of 30 of the most noted preachers of the last century, and found that their average length of life was 69 years. Among miners in some sections, over 600 out of 1,000 die from consumption. In the prisons of Europe, where the fatal effects of bad air and filth are shown, over 61% of the deaths are from tuberculosis. In Bavarian monasteries, 50% of those who enter in good health die of consumption, and in the Prussian prisons it is almost the same. The effect of bad air, filth, and bad food is shown by the fact that the death rate among these classes, between the ages of 20 and 40, is 5 times that of the general population of the same age. In New York City, over 1/5 of all the deaths of persons over 20 are from this cause. In large cities in Europe, the percentage is often still greater. Of 1,000 deaths from all causes, on the average, 103 farmers die of pulmonary tuberculosis, 108 fishermen, 121 gardeners, 122 farm laborers, 167 grocers, 209 tailors, 301 dry goods dealers, and 461 compositors, nearly one-half. According to a long series of investigations by Drs. Benoisen and Lombard into occupations or trades where workers must inhale dust, it appears that mineral dust is the most detrimental to health, animal dust ranking next, and vegetable dust third. In choosing an occupation, cleanliness, pure air, sunlight, and freedom from corroding dust and poisonous gases are of the greatest importance. A man who would sell a year of his life for any amount of money would be considered insane, And yet we deliberately choose occupations and vocations which statistics and physicians tell us will be practically sure to cut off from 5 to 25, 30, or even 40 years of our lives, and are seemingly perfectly indifferent to our fate. There is danger in a calling which requires great expenditure of vitality at long, irregular intervals. He who is not regularly or systematically employed incurs perpetual risk. Of the 32 all-round athletes in a New York club not long ago, said a physician, 3 are dead of consumption, 5 have to wear trusses, 4 or 5 are lop-shouldered, and 3 have catarrh and partial deafness. Dr. Patton, chief surgeon at the National Soldiers' Home at Dayton, Ohio, says that, of the 5,000 soldiers in that institution, fully 80% are suffering from heart disease in one form or another, due to the forced physical exertions of the campaigns. Man's faculties and functions are so interrelated that whatever affects one affects all. Athletes who overdevelop the muscular system do so at the expense of the physical, mental, and moral well-being. It is a law of nature that the overdevelopment of any function or faculty, forcing or straining it, tends not only to ruin it, but also to cause injurious reactions on every other faculty and function. Vigorous thought must come from a fresh brain. We cannot expect nerve, snap, robustness and vigor, sprightliness and elasticity, in the speech, in the book, or in the essay, from an exhausted, jaded brain. The brain is one of the last organs of the body to reach maturity, at about the age of 28, and should never be overworked, especially in youth. The whole future of a man is often ruined by overstraining the brain in school. Brain workers cannot do good, effective work in one line many hours a day. When the brain is weary, when it begins to lose its elasticity and freshness, there will be the same lack of tonicity and strength in the brain product. Some men often do a vast amount of literary work in entirely different lines during their spare hours. Cessation of brain activity does not necessarily constitute brain rest, as most great thinkers know. The men who accomplish the most brain work, sooner or later, usually later, unfortunately, learn to give rest to one set of faculties and use another, as interest begins to flag and a sense of weariness comes. In this way they have been enabled to astonish the world by their mental achievements, which is very largely a matter of skill in exercising alternate sets of faculties, allowing rest to some while giving healthy exercise to others. The continual use of one set of faculties by an ambitious worker will soon bring him to grief. No set of brain cells can possibly set free more brain force in the combustion of thought than is stored up in them. The tired brain must have rest, or nervous exhaustion, brain fever, or even softening of the brain is liable to follow. As a rule, physical vigor is the condition of a great career. What would Gladstone have accomplished with a weak, puny physique? He addresses an audience at Corfu in Greek, and another at Florence in Italian. A little later he converses at ease with Bismarck in German, or talks fluent French in Paris, or piles up argument on argument in English for hours in Parliament. There are families that have clutched success and kept it through generations from the simple fact of a splendid physical organization handed down from one generation to another. William Ewart Gladstone. All occupations that enervate, paralyze, or destroy body or soul should be avoided. Our manufacturing interests too often give little thought to the employed. The article to be made is generally the only object considered. They do not care if a man spends the whole of his life upon the head of a pin, or in making a screw in a watch factory. They take no notice of the occupations that ruin, or the phosphorus, the dust, the arsenic that destroys the health, that shortens the lives of many workers, of the cramped condition of the body which creates deformity. The moment we compel those we employ to do work that demoralizes them or does not tend to elevate or lift them, we are forcing them into service worse than useless. If we induce painters to work in fading colors, or architects with rotten stone, or contractors to construct buildings with imperfect materials, we are forcing our Michelangelos to carve in snow. Ruskin says that the tendency of the age is to expend its genius in perishable art, as if it were a triumph to burn its thoughts away in bonfires. Is the work you compel others to do useful to yourself and to society? If you employ a seamstress to make 4 or 5 or 6 beautiful flounces for your ball dress, flounces which will only clothe yourself, and which you will wear at only one ball, you are employing your money selfishly. Do not confuse covetousness with benevolence, nor cheat yourself into thinking that all the finery you can wear is so much put into the hungry mouths of those beneath you. It is what those who stand shivering on the street, forming a line to see you step out of your carriage, know it to be. These fine dresses do not mean that so much has been put into their mouths, but that so much has been taken out of their mouths. Select a clean, useful, honorable occupation. If there is any doubt on this point, abandon it at once, for familiarity with a bad business will make it seem good. Choose a business that has expansiveness in it. Some kinds of business not even A.J. Pierpont Morgan could make respectable. Choose an occupation which will develop you, which will elevate you, which will give you a chance for self-improvement and promotion. You may not make quite so much money, but you will be more of a man, and manhood is above all riches, overtops all titles, and character is greater than any career. If possible, avoid occupations which compel you to work in a cramped position, or where you must work at night and on Sundays. Don't try to justify yourself on the ground that somebody must do this kind of work. Let somebody, not yourself, take the responsibility. Aside from the right and wrong of the thing, it is injurious to the health to work 7 days in the week, to work at night when nature intended you to sleep, or to sleep in the daytime when she intended you to work. Many a man has dwarfed his manhood, cramped his intellect, crushed his aspiration, blunted his finer sensibilities, in some mean, narrow occupation just because there was money in it. Study yourself, says Longfellow, and most of all, note well wherein kind nature meant you to excel. Dr. Matthews says that, to no other cause, perhaps, is failure in life so frequently to be traced as to a mistaken calling. We can often find out by hard knocks and repeated failures what we cannot do before what we can do. This negative process of eliminating the doubtful chances is often the only way of attaining to the positive conclusion. How many men have been made ridiculous for life by choosing law or medicine or theology, simply because they are honorable professions? These men might have been respectable farmers or merchants, but are nobodies in such vocations. The very glory of the profession which they thought would make them shining lights simply renders more conspicuous their incapacity. Thousands of youths receive an education that fits them for a profession which they have not the means or inclination to follow, and that unfits them for the conditions of life to which they were born. Unsuccessful students with a smattering of everything are raised as much above their original condition as if they were successful. A large portion of Paris cabmen are unsuccessful students in theology and other professions, and also unfrocked priests. They are very bad cabmen. Tompkins forsakes his last and all for literary squabbles. Styles himself poet, but his trade remains the same. He cobbles. Don't choose a profession or occupation because your father or uncle or brother is in it. Don't choose a business because you inherit it, or because parents or friends want you to follow it. Don't choose it because others have made fortunes in it. Don't choose it because it is considered the proper thing and a genteel business. The mania for a genteel occupation, for a soft job, which eliminates drudgery, thorns, hardships, and all disagreeable things, and one which can be learned with very little effort, ruins many a youth. When we try to do that for which we are unfitted, we are not working along the line of our strength, but of our weakness. Our willpower and enthusiasm become demoralized. We do half work, botched work, lose confidence in ourselves, and conclude that we are dunces because we cannot accomplish what others do. The whole tone of life is demoralized and lowered because we are out of place. How it shortens the road to success to make a wise choice of one's occupation early, to be started on the road of a proper career while young, full of hope, while the animal spirits are high, and enthusiasm is vigorous. To feel that every step we take, that every day's work we do, that every blow we strike helps to broaden, deepen, and enrich life. Those who fail are, as a rule, those who are out of their places. A man out of his place is but half a man. His very nature is perverted. He is working against his nature, rowing against the current. When his strength is exhausted, he will float down the stream. A man cannot succeed when his whole nature is entering its perpetual protest against his occupation. To succeed, his vocation must have the consent of all his faculties. They must be in harmony with his purpose. Has a young man a right to choose an occupation which will only call into play his lower and inferior qualities, as cunning, deceit, letting all his nobler qualities shrivel and die? Has he a right to select a vocation that will develop only the beast within him instead of the man? Which will call out the bulldog qualities only, the qualities which overreach and grasp, the qualities which get and never give, which develop long-headedness only, while his higher self atrophies? The best way to choose an occupation is to ask yourself the question, what would my government do with me if it were to consider scientifically my qualifications and adaptations, and place me to the best possible advantage for all the people? The Norwegian precept is a good one: give thyself wholly to thy fellow men, they will give thee back soon enough. We can do the most possible for ourselves when we are in a position where we can do the most possible for others. We are doing the most for ourselves and for others when we are in a position which calls into play in the highest possible way the greatest number of our best faculties. In other words, we are succeeding best for ourselves when we are succeeding best for others. The time will come when there will be institutions for determining the natural bent of the boy and girl, where men of large experience and close observation will study the natural inclination of the youth, help him to find where his greatest strength lies and how to use it to the best advantage. Even if we take for granted what is not true, that every youth will sooner or later discover the line of his greatest strength so that he may get his living by his strong points rather than by his weak ones, the discovery is often made so late in life that great success is practically impossible. Such institutions would help boys and girls to start in their proper careers early in life, and an early choice shortens the way. Can anything be more important to human beings than a start in life in the right direction, where even small effort will count for more in the race than the greatest effort, and a life of drudgery in the wrong direction? A man is seldom unsuccessful, unhappy, or vicious when he is in his place. After once choosing your occupation, however, never look backward. Stick to it with all the tenacity you can muster. Let nothing tempt you or swerve you a hair's breadth from your aim, and you will win. Do not let the thorns which appear in every vocation, or temporary despondency or disappointment, shake your purpose. You will never succeed while smarting under the drudgery of your occupation, if you are constantly haunted with the idea that you could succeed better in something else. Great tenacity of purpose is the only thing that will carry you over the hard places which appear in every career to ultimate triumph. This determination, or fixity of purpose, has a great moral bearing upon our success, for it leads others to feel confidence in us, and this is everything. It gives credit and moral support in 1,000 ways. People always believe in a man with a fixed purpose, and will help him twice as quickly as one who is loosely or indifferently attached to his vocation, and liable at any time to make a change, or to fail. Everybody knows that determined men are not likely to fail. They carry in their very pluck, grit, and determination the conviction and assurance of success. The world does not dictate what you shall do, but it does demand that you do something, and that you shall be a king in your line. There is no grander sight than that of a young man or woman in the right place struggling with might and main to make the most of the stuff at command, determined that not a faculty or power shall run to waste. Not money, not position, but power is what we want, and character is greater than any occupation or profession. Do not, I beseech you, said Garfield, be content to enter on any business that does not require and compel constant intellectual growth. Choose an occupation that is refining and elevating, an occupation that you will be proud of, an occupation that will give you time for self-culture and self-elevation, an occupation that will enlarge and expand your manhood and make you a better citizen, a better man. Power and constant growth toward a higher life are the great end of human existence. Your calling should be the great school of life, the great man-developer, character-builder, that which should broaden, deepen, and round out into symmetry, harmony, and beauty all the God-given faculties within you. But whatever you do, be greater than your calling. Let your manhood overtop your position, your wealth, your occupation, your title. A man must work hard and study hard to counteract the narrowing, hardening tendency of his occupation. Said Goldsmith, Burke, born for the universe, narrowed his mind, and to party gave up what was meant for mankind. Constant engagement in traffic and barter has no elevating influence, says Lindell. The endeavor to obtain the upper hand of those with whom we have to deal, to make good bargains, the higgling and scheming, and the 1,000 petty artifices, which in these days of stern competition are unscrupulously resorted to, tend to narrow the sphere and to lessen the strength of the intellect, and, at the same time, the delicacy of the moral sense. Choose upward, study the men in the vocation you think of adopting. Does it elevate those who follow it? Are they broad, liberal, intelligent men? Or have they become mere appendages of their profession, living in a rut with no standing in the community, and of no use to it? Don't think you will be the great exception, and can enter a questionable vocation without becoming a creature of it. In spite of all your determination and will-power to the contrary, your occupation, from the very law of association and habit, will seize you as in a vice, will mold you, shape you, fashion you, and stamp its inevitable impress upon you. How frequently do we see bright, open-hearted, generous young men come out of college with high hopes and lofty aims, enter a doubtful vocation, and in a few years return to college commencement so changed that they are scarcely recognized. The once broad, noble features have become contracted and narrowed. The man has become grasping, avaricious, stingy, mean, hard. Is it possible, we ask, that a few years could so change a magnanimous and generous youth? Go to the bottom if you would get to the top. Be master of your calling in all its details. Nothing is small which concerns your business. Thousands of men who have been failures in life have done drudgery enough in half a dozen different occupations to have enabled them to reach great success, if their efforts had all been expended in one direction. That mechanic is a failure who starts out to build an engine, but does not quite accomplish it, and shifts into some other occupation where perhaps he will almost succeed, but stops just short of the point of proficiency in his acquisition and so fails again. The world is full of people who are almost a success. They stop just this side of success. Their courage oozes out just before they become expert. How many of us have acquisitions which remain permanently unavailable because not carried quite to the point of skill? How many people almost know a language or two which they can neither write nor speak, a science or two whose elements they have not quite acquired, an art or two partially mastered, but which they cannot practice with satisfaction or profit? The habit of desultoriness, which has been acquired by allowing yourself to abandon a half-finished work, more than balances any little skill gained in one vocation which might possibly be of use later. Beware of that frequently fatal gift, versatility. Many a person misses being a great man by splitting into two middling ones. Universality is the ignis fatuus which has deluded to ruin many a promising mind. In attempting to gain a knowledge of 100 subjects, it has mastered none. The jack of all trades, says one of the foremost manufacturers of this country, had a chance in my generation. In this he has none. The measure of a man's learning will be the amount of his voluntary ignorance, said Thoreau. If we go into a factory where the mariner's compass is made, we can see the needles before they are magnetized. They will point in any direction. But when they have been applied to the magnet and received its peculiar power, from that moment they point to the north, and are true to the pole ever after. So man never points steadily in any direction until he has been polarized by a great master purpose. Give your life, your energy, your enthusiasm, all to the highest work of which you are capable. Canon Farrar said, "There is only one real failure in life possible, and that is, not to be true to the best one knows." What must I do to be forever known? Thy duty ever. Who does the best his circumstance allows, does well, acts nobly, angels could do no more. Young. Whoever can make 2 ears of corn, 2 blades of grass to grow upon a spot of ground where only one grew before, says Swift, would deserve better of mankind and do more essential service to his country than the whole race of politicians put together. Chapter 12, Concentrated Energy. This one thing I do, St. Paul. The one prudence in life is concentration, the one evil is dissipation, and it makes no difference whether our dissipations are coarse or fine. Everything is good which takes away one plaything and delusion more, and sends us home to add one stroke of faithful work. Emerson. The man who seeks one thing in life, and but one, may hope to achieve it before life be done. But he who seeks all things, wherever he goes, only reaps from the hopes which around him he sows. A harvest of barren regrets. Owen Meredith. The longer I live, the more deeply am I convinced that that which makes the difference between one man and another, between the weak and powerful, the great and insignificant, is energy, invincible determination, a purpose once formed, and then death or victoried. Foul Buxton. There was not enough room for us all in Frankfurt, said Nathan Mayer Rothschild, in speaking of himself and his 4 brothers. I dealt in English goods. One great trader came there, who had the market to himself. He was quite the great man, and did us a favor if he sold us goods. Somehow I offended him, and he refused to show me his patterns. This was on a Tuesday. I said to my father, "I will go to England." On Thursday I started. The nearer I got to England, the cheaper goods were. As soon as I got to Manchester, I laid out all my money, things were so cheap, and I made a good profit. I hope, said a listener, that your children are not too fond of money and business to the exclusion of more important things. I am sure you would not wish that. I am sure I would wish that, said Rothschild. I wish them to give mind and soul and heart and body and everything to business. That is the way to be happy. Stick to one business, young man, he added, addressing a young brewer. Stick to your brewery, and you may be the great brewer of London. But be a brewer, and a banker, and a merchant, and a manufacturer, and you will soon be in the Gazette. Not many things indifferently, but one thing supremely is the demand of the hour. He who scatters his efforts in this intense, concentrated age cannot hope to succeed. Goods removed, messages taken, carpets beaten, and poetry composed on any subject was the sign of a man in London who was not very successful at any of these lines of work, and reminds one of Monsieur Kennard, of Paris, a public scribe who digests accounts, explains the language of flowers, and sells fried potatoes. The great difference between those who succeed and those who fail does not consist in the amount of work done by each, but in the amount of intelligent work. Many of those who fail most ignominiously do enough to achieve grand success, but they labor at haphazard, building up with one hand only to tear down with the other. They do not grasp circumstances and change them into opportunities. They have no faculty of turning honest defeats into telling victories. With ability enough and time in abundance, the warp and woof of success, they are forever throwing back and forth an empty shuttle, and the real web of life is never woven. If you ask one of them to state his aim and purpose in life, he will say, "I hardly know yet for what I am best adapted, but I am a thorough believer in genuine hard work, and I am determined to dig early and late all my life, and I know I shall come across something, either gold, silver, or at least iron." I say most emphatically, no. Would an intelligent man dig up a whole continent to find its veins of silver and gold? The man who is forever looking about to see what he can find never finds anything. If we look for nothing in particular, we find just that and no more. We find what we seek with all our heart. The bee is not the only insect that visits the flower, but it is the only one that carries honey away. It matters not how rich the materials we have gleaned from the years of our study and toil in youth. If we go out into life with no well-defined idea of our future work, there is no happy conjunction of circumstances that will arrange them into an imposing structure and give it magnificent proportions. What an immense power over the life, says Elizabeth Stuart Phelps Ward, is the power of possessing distinct aims. The voice, the dress, the look, the very motions of a person define and alter when he or she begins to live for a reason. I fancy that I can select, in a crowded street, the busy, blessed women who support themselves. They carry themselves with an air of conscious self-respect and self-content, which a shabby alpaca cannot hide, nor a bonnet of silk enhance, nor even sickness nor exhaustion quite drag out. It is said that the wind never blows fair for that sailor who knows not to what port he is bound. The weakest living creature, says Carlyle, by concentrating his powers on a single object, can accomplish something, whereas the strongest, by dispersing his over many, may fail to accomplish anything. The drop, by continually falling, bores its passage through the hardest rock. The hasty torrent rushes over it with hideous uproar and leaves no trace behind. "When I was young I used to think it was thunder that killed men," said a shrewd preacher, "but as I grew older I found it was lightning. So I resolved to thunder less, and lighten more." The man who knows one thing, and can do it better than anybody else, even if it only be the art of raising turnips, receives the crown he merits. If he raises the best turnips by reason of concentrating all his energy to that end, he is a benefactor to the race, and is recognized as such. If a salamander be cut in two, the front part will run forward and the other backward. Such is the progress of him who divides his purpose. Success is jealous of scattered energies. No one can pursue a worthy object steadily and persistently with all the powers of his mind, and yet make his life a failure. You can't throw a tallow candle through the side of a tent, but you can shoot it through an oak board. Melt a charge of shot into a bullet, and it can be fired through the bodies of 4 men. Focus the rays of the sun in winter, and you can kindle a fire with ease. The giants of the race have been men of concentration, who have struck sledgehammer blows in one place until they have accomplished their purpose. The successful men of today are men of one overmastering idea, one unwavering aim, men of single and intense purpose. Scatteration is the curse of American business life. Too many are like Douglas Jerrold's friend, who could converse in 24 languages, but had no ideas to express in any one of them. "The only valuable kind of study," said Sidney Smith, "is to read so heartily that dinner-time comes 2 hours before you expected it, to sit with your Livy before you and hear the geese cackling that saved the Capitol, and to see with your own eyes the Carthaginian sutlers gathering up the rings of the Roman knights after the Battle of Cannae and heaping them into bushels, and to be so intimately present at the actions you are reading of, that when anybody knocks at the door it will take you 2 or 3 seconds to determine whether you are in your own study or on the plains of Lombardy, looking at Hannibal's weather-beaten face and admiring the splendor of his single eye. The one serviceable, safe, certain, remunerative, attainable quality in every study and pursuit is the quality of attention, said Charles Dickens. My own invention, or imagination, such as it is, I can most truthfully assure you, would never have served me as it has, but for the habit of commonplace, humble, patient, daily, toiling, drudging attention. When asked on another occasion the secret of his success, he said, "I never put one hand to anything on which I could throw my whole self." "Be a whole man at everything," wrote Joseph Gurney to his son, "a whole man at study, in work, and in play. Don't dally with your purpose." "I go at what I am about," said Charles Kingsley, "as if there was nothing else in the world for the time being." That's the secret of all hard-working men, but most of them can't carry it into their amusements. Many a man fails to become a great man by splitting into several small ones, choosing to be a tolerable jack-of-all-trades rather than to be an unrivaled specialist. "Many persons seeing me so much engaged in active life," said Edward Bulwer Lytton, "and as much about the world as if I had never been a student, have said to me, 'When do you get time to write all your books? How on earth do you contrive to do so much work?' I shall surprise you by the answer I made. The answer is this: I contrive to do so much by never doing too much at a time. A man to get through work well must not overwork himself, or if he do too much today, the reaction of fatigue will come, and he will be obliged to do too little tomorrow. Now, since I began really and earnestly to study, which was not till I had left college and was actually in the world, I may perhaps say that I have gone through as large a course of general reading as most men of my time. I have traveled much and I have seen much. I have mixed much in politics and in the various business of life, and in addition to all this, I have published somewhere about 60 volumes, some upon subjects requiring much special research. And what time do you think, as a general rule, I have devoted to study, to reading and writing? Not more than 3 hours a day, and, when Parliament is sitting, not always that. But then, during these 3 hours, I have given my whole attention to what I was about. St. Coleridge possessed marvelous powers of mind, but he had no definite purpose. He lived in an atmosphere of mental dissipation which consumed his energy, exhausted his stamina, and his life was in many respects a miserable failure. He lived in dreams and died in reverie. He was continually forming plans and resolutions, but to the day of his death they remained simply resolutions and plans. He was always just going to do something, but never did it. "Coleridge is dead," wrote Charles Lamb to a friend, "and is said to have left behind him above 40,000 treatises on metaphysics and divinity, not one of them complete." Every great man has become great, every successful man has succeeded, in proportion as he has confined his powers to one particular channel. Hogarth would rivet his attention upon a face and study it until it was photographed upon his memory, when he could reproduce it at will. He studied and examined each object as eagerly as though he would never have a chance to see it again, and this habit of close observation enabled him to develop his work with marvelous detail. The very modes of thought of the time in which he lived were reflected from his works. He was not a man of great education or culture, except in his power of observation. With an immense procession passing up Broadway, the streets lined with people, and bands playing lustily, Horace Greeley would sit upon the steps of the Astor House, use the top of his hat for a desk, and write an editorial for the New York Tribune which would be quoted far and wide. Offended by a pungent article, a gentleman called at the Tribune office and inquired for the editor. He was shown into a little 7-by-9 sanctum, where Greeley, with his head close down to his paper, sat scribbling away at a 240 rate. The angry man began by asking if this was Mr. Greeley. "Yes, sir. What do you want?" said the editor quickly, without once looking up from his paper. The irate visitor then began using his tongue, with no regard for the rules of propriety, good breeding, or reason. Meantime Mr. Greeley continued to write. Page after page was dashed off in the most impetuous style, with no change of features and without his paying the slightest attention to the visitor. Finally, after about 20 minutes of the most impassioned abuse ever poured out in an editor's office, the angry man became disgusted, and abruptly turned to walk out of the room. Then, for the first time, Mr. Greeley quickly looked up, rose from his chair, and slapping the gentleman familiarly on his shoulder, in a pleasant tone of voice said, "Don't go, friend. Sit down, and free your mind. It will do you good. You will feel better for it. Besides, it helps me to think what I am to write about. Don't go." One unwavering aim has ever characterized successful men. "Daniel Webster," said Sidney Smith, "struck me much like a steam engine in trousers." As Adam suggests, Lord Brougham, like Canning, had too many talents, and though as a lawyer he gained the most splendid prize of his profession, the Lord Chancellorship of England, and merited the applause of scientific men for his investigations in science, yet his life on the whole was a failure. He was everything by turns and nothing long. With all his magnificent abilities, he left no permanent mark on history or literature, and actually outlived his own fame. Miss Martineau says, Lord Brougham was at his chateau at Cannes when the daguerreotype process first came into vogue. An artist undertook to take a view of the chateau with a group of guests on the balcony. His lordship was asked to keep perfectly still for 5 seconds, and he promised that he would not stir, but alas, he moved. The consequence was that there was a blur where Lord Brougham should have been. There is something, continued Miss Martineau, very typical in this. In the picture of our century, as taken from the life by history, this very man should have been the central figure. But, owing to his want of steadfastness, there will be forever a blur where Lord Brougham should have been. How many lives are blurs for want of concentration and steadfastness of purpose? Fowell Buxton attributed his success to ordinary means and extraordinary application, and being a whole man to one thing at a time. It is ever the unwavering pursuit of a single aim that wins. Non multa, sed multum, not many things, but much, was Koch's motto. It is the almost invisible point of a needle, the keen, slender edge of a razor or an axe, that opens the way for the bulk that follows. Without point or edge the bulk would be useless. It is the man of one line of work, the sharp-edged man, who cuts his way through obstacles and achieves brilliant success. While we should shun that narrow devotion to one idea which prevents the harmonious development of our powers, we should avoid, on the other hand, the extreme versatility of one of whom W.M. Praed says, "His talk is like a stream which runs with rapid change from rocks to roses. It slips from politics to puns. It glides from Mahomet to Moses, beginning with the laws that keep the planets in their radiant courses, and ending with some precept deep for skinning eels or shoeing horses." If you can get a child learning to walk to fix his eyes on any object, he will generally navigate to that point without capsizing, but distract his attention and down he goes. The young man seeking a position today is not asked what college he came from or who his ancestors were. What can you do? Is the great question. It is special training that is wanted. Most of the men at the head of great firms and great enterprises have been promoted step by step from the bottom. "I know that he can toil terribly," said Cecil of Walter Raleigh, in explanation of the latter's success. As a rule, what the heart longs for the head and the hands may attain. The currents of knowledge, of wealth, of success, are as certain and fixed as the tides of the sea. In all great successes we can trace the power of concentration, riveting every faculty upon one unwavering aim, perseverance in the pursuit of an undertaking in spite of every difficulty, and courage which enables one to bear up under all trials, disappointments, and temptations. Chemists tell us that there is power enough in a single acre of grass to drive all the mills and steam cars in the world, could we but concentrate it upon the piston rod of a steam engine. But it is at rest, and so, in the light of science, it is comparatively valueless. Dr. Matthews says that the man who scatters himself upon many objects soon loses his energy, and with his energy his enthusiasm. "Never study on speculation," says Waters. "All such study is vain. Form a plan, have an object, then work for it, learn all you can about it, and you will be sure to succeed." What I mean by studying on speculation is that aimless learning of things because they may be useful some day, which is like the conduct of the woman who bought at auction a brass doorplate with the name of Thompson on it, thinking it might be useful some day. Definiteness of aim is characteristic of all true art. He is not the greatest painter who crowds the greatest number of ideas upon a single canvas, giving all the figures equal prominence. He is the genuine artist who makes the greatest variety express the greatest unity, who develops the leading idea in the central figure, and makes all the subordinate figures, lights, and shades point to that center and find expression there. So in every well-balanced life, no matter how versatile in endowments or how broad in culture, there is one grand central purpose, in which all the subordinate powers of the soul are brought to a focus, and where they will find fit expression. In nature we see no waste of energy, nothing left to chance. Since the shuttle of creation shot for the first time through chaos, design has marked the course of every golden thread. Every leaf, every flower, every crystal, every atom even, has a purpose stamped upon it which unmistakably points to the crowning summit of all creation, man. Young men are often told to aim high, but we must aim at what we would hit. A general purpose is not enough. The arrow shot from the bow does not wander around to see what it can hit on its way, but flies straight to the mark. The magnetic needle does not point to all the lights in the heavens to see which it likes best. They all attract it. The sun dazzles, the meteor beckons, the stars twinkle to it, and try to win its affections. But the needle, true to its instinct, and with a finger that never errs in sunshine or in storm, points steadily to the North Star. For, while all the other stars must course with untiring tread around their great centers through all the ages, the North Star, alone, distant beyond human comprehension, moves with stately sweep on its circuit of more than 25,000 years, for all practical purposes of man. Stationary, not only for a day, but for a century. So all along the path of life other luminaries will beckon to lead us from our cherished aim, from the course of truth and duty, but let no moons which shine with borrowed light, no meteors which dazzle, but never guide, turn the needle of our purpose from the North Star of its hope. Chapter 13. The Triumphs of Enthusiasm. The labor we delight in physics pained. Shakespeare. The only conclusive evidence of a man's sincerity is that he gives himself for a principle. Words, money, all things else are comparatively easy to give away, but when a man makes a gift of his daily life and practice, it is plain that the truth, whatever it may be, has taken possession of him. Lowell. Let us beware of losing our enthusiasm. Let us ever glory in something, and strive to retain our admiration for all that would ennoble, and our interest in all that would enrich and beautify our life. Phillips Brooks. In the Galerie des Beaux-Arts in Paris is a beautiful statue conceived by a sculptor who was so poor that he lived and worked in a small garret. When his clay model was nearly done, a heavy frost fell upon the city. He knew that if the water in the interstices of the clay should freeze, the beautiful lines would be distorted. So he wrapped his bedclothes around the clay image. In the morning he was found dead, but his idea was saved, and other hands gave it enduring form in marble. "I do not know how it is with others when speaking on an important question," said Henry Clay, "but on such occasions I seem to be unconscious of the external world. Wholly engrossed by the subject before me, I lose all sense of personal identity, of time, or of surrounding objects. A bank never becomes very successful," says a noted financier, "until it gets a president who takes it to bed with him." Enthusiasm gives the otherwise dry and uninteresting subject or occupation a new meaning. As the young lover has finer sense and more acute vision and sees in the object of his affections 100 virtues and charms invisible to all other eyes, so a man permeated with enthusiasm has his power of perception heightened and his vision magnified until he sees beauty and charms others cannot discern which compensate for drudgery, privations, hardships, and even persecution. Dickens says he was haunted, possessed, spirit-driven by the plots and characters in his stories which would not let him sleep or rest until he had committed them to paper. On one sketch he shut himself up for a month, and when he came out he looked as haggard as a murderer. His characters haunted him day and night. "Herr Kapellmeister, I should like to compose something. How shall I begin?" asked a youth of 12 who had played with great skill on the piano. "Pooh, pooh," replied Mozart. "You must wait." "But you began when you were younger than I am," said the boy. "Yes, so I did," said the great composer, "but I never asked anything about it. When one has the spirit of a composer, he writes because he can't help it." Gladstone said that what is really desired is to light up the spirit that is within a boy. In some sense and in some degree, in some effectual degree, there is in every boy the material of good work in the world. In every boy, not only in those who are brilliant, not only in those who are quick, but in those who are stolid, and even in those who are dull or who seem to be dull. If they have only the good will, the dullness will day by day clear away and vanish completely under the influence of the good will. Gerster, an unknown Hungarian, made fame and fortune sure the first night she appeared in opera. Her enthusiasm almost hypnotized her auditors. In less than a week she had become popular and independent. Her soul was smitten with a passion for growth, and all the powers of heart and mind she possessed were enthusiastically devoted to self-improvement. All great works of art have been produced when the artist was intoxicated with a passion for beauty and form which would not let him rest until his thought was expressed in marble or on canvas. "Well, I've worked hard enough for it," said Malibran when a critic expressed his admiration of her D in alt, reached by running up 3 octaves from low D. "I've been chasing it for a month. I pursued it everywhere, when I was dressing, when I was doing my hair, and at last I found it on the toe of a shoe that I was putting on. Every great and commanding moment in the annals of the world, says Emerson, is the triumph of some enthusiasm. The victories of the Arabs after Muhammad, who, in a few years, from a small and mean beginning, established a larger empire than that of Rome, is an example. They did they knew not what. The naked Durar, horsed on an idea, was found an overmatch for a troop of cavalry. The women fought like men and conquered the Roman men. They were miserably equipped, miserably fed, but they were temperance troops. There was neither brandy nor flesh needed to feed them. They conquered Asia and Africa and Spain on barley. The Caliph Omar's walking stick struck more terror into those who saw it than another man's sword. It was enthusiasm that enabled Napoleon to make a campaign in 2 weeks that would have taken another a year to accomplish. "These Frenchmen are not men, they fly," said the Austrians in consternation. In 15 days Napoleon, in his first Italian campaign, had gained 6 victories, taken 21 standards, 55 pieces of cannon, had captured 15,000 prisoners, and had conquered Piedmont. After this astonishing avalanche, a discomfited Austrian general said, "This young commander knows nothing whatever about the art of war. He is a perfect ignoramus. There is no doing anything with him." But his soldiers followed their little corporal with an enthusiasm which knew no defeat or disaster. "There are important cases," says A. H. K. Boyd, "in which the difference between half a heart and a whole heart makes just the difference between signal defeat and a splendid victory." "Should I die this minute," said Nelson at an important crisis, "want of frigates would be found written on my heart." The simple, innocent maid of Orleans with her sacred sword, her consecrated banner, and her belief in her great mission, sent a thrill of enthusiasm through the whole French army such as neither king nor statesman could produce. Her zeal carried everything before it. What a great work each one could perform in this world if he only knew his power! But, like a bit horse, man does not realize his strength until he has once run away with himself. Underneath is laid the builder of this church and city, Christopher Wren, who lived more than 90 years, not for himself, but for the public good. Reader, if you seek his monument, look around. Turn where you will in London, you find noble monuments of the genius of a man who never received instruction from an architect. He built 55 churches in the city and 36 halls. "I would give my skin for the architect's design of the Louvre," said he, when in Paris to get ideas for the restoration of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. His rare skill is shown in the palaces of Hampton Court and Kensington, in Temple Bar, Drury Lane Theatre, the Royal Exchange, and the Great Monument. He changed Greenwich Palace into a sailor's retreat, and built churches and colleges at Oxford. He also planned for the rebuilding of London after the Great Fire, but those in authority would not adopt his splendid idea. He worked 35 years upon his masterpiece, St. Paul's Cathedral. Although he lived so long, and was exceedingly healthy in later life, he was so delicate as a child that he was a constant source of anxiety to his parents. His great enthusiasm alone seemed to give strength to his body. Indifference never leads armies that conquer, never models statues that live, nor breathes sublime music, nor harnesses the forces of nature, nor rears impressive architecture, nor moves the soul with poetry, nor the world with heroic philanthropies. Enthusiasm, as Charles Bell says of the hand, wrought the statue of Memnon and hung the brazen gates of Thebes. It fixed the mariner's trembling needle upon its axis, and first heaved the tremendous bar of the printing press. It opened the tubes for Galileo, until world after world swept before his vision, and it reefed the high topsail that rustled over Columbus in the morning breezes of the Bahamas. It has held the sword with which freedom has fought her battles, and poised the axe of the dauntless woodman as he opened the paths of civilization, and turned the mystic leaves upon which Milton and Shakespeare inscribed their burning thoughts. Horace Greeley said that the best product of labor is the high-minded workman with an enthusiasm for his work. "The best method is obtained by earnestness," said Salvini. "If you can impress people with the conviction that you feel what you say, they will pardon many shortcomings. And above all, study, study, study. All the genius in the world will not help you along with any art, unless you become a hard student. It has taken me years to master a single part." There is a go, a zeal, a furor, almost a fanaticism for one's ideals or calling, that is peculiar to our American temperament and life. You do not find this in tropical countries. It did not exist 50 years ago. It could not be found then even on the London Exchange. But the influence of the United States and of Australia, where, if a person is to succeed, he must be on the jump with all the ardor of his being, has finally extended until what used to be the peculiar strength of a few great minds has now become characteristic of the leading nations. Enthusiasm is the being awake. It is the tingling of every fiber of one's being to do the work that one's heart desires. Enthusiasm made Victor Hugo lock up his clothes while writing Notre Dame, that he might not leave the work until it was finished. The great actor Garrick well illustrated it when asked by an unsuccessful preacher the secret of his power over audiences. "You speak of eternal verities and what you know to be true as if you hardly believed what you were saying yourself, whereas I utter what I know to be unreal and untrue as if I did believe it in my very soul." When he comes into a room, every man feels as if he had taken a tonic and had a new lease of life, said a man when asked the reason for his selection, after he, with 2 companions, had written upon a slip of paper the name of the most agreeable companion he had ever met. He is an eager, vivid fellow, full of joy, bubbling over with spirits. His sympathies are quick as an electric flash. He throws himself into the occasion, whatever it may be, with his whole heart, said the second, in praise of the man of his choice. He makes the best of everything, said the third, speaking of his own most cherished acquaintance. The 3 were traveling correspondents of great English journals, who had visited every quarter of the world and talked with all kinds of men. The papers were examined, and all were found to contain the name of a prominent lawyer in Melbourne, Australia. "If it were not for respect for human opinions," said Madame de Stael to M. Mole, "I would not open my window to see the Bay of Naples for the first time, while I would go 500 leagues to talk with a man of genius whom I had not seen." Enthusiasm is that secret and harmonious spirit which hovers over the production of genius, throwing the reader of a book, or the spectator of a statue, into the very ideal presence whence these works have originated. "One moonlight evening in winter," writes the biographer of Beethoven, "we were walking through a narrow street of Bonn." "Hush!" exclaimed the great composer, suddenly pausing before a little mean dwelling. "What sound is that?" "It is from my sonata in F. Hark! How well it is played!" In the midst of the finale there was a break, and a sobbing voice cried, "I cannot play any more. It is so beautiful. It is utterly beyond my power to do it justice. Oh, what would I not give to go to the concert at Cologne!" "Ah, my sister," said a second voice, "why create regrets when there is no remedy? We can scarcely pay our rent." "You are right," said the first speaker, "and yet I wish for once in my life to hear some really good music. But it is of no use." "Let us go in," said Beethoven. "Go in," I remonstrated. "What should we go in for?" "I will play to her," replied my companion in an excited tone. "Here is feeling, genius, understanding. I will play to her, and she will understand it. Pardon me," he continued, as he opened the door and saw a young man sitting by a table, mending shoes, and a young girl leaning sorrowfully upon an old-fashioned piano. "I heard music and was tempted to enter. I am a musician. I also overheard something of what you said. You wish to hear, that is, you would like, that is, shall I play for you?" "Thank you," said the shoemaker, "but our piano is so wretched, and we have no music." "No music!" exclaimed the composer. "How, then, does the young lady— I entreat your pardon," he added, stammering as he saw that the girl was blind. "I had not perceived before." "Then you play by ear. But where do you hear the music, since you frequent no concerts?" "We lived at Bruhl for 2 years, and, while there, I used to hear a lady practicing near us. During the summer evenings her windows were generally open, and I walked to and fro outside to listen to her." Beethoven seated himself at the piano. Never, during all the years I knew him, did I hear him play better than to that blind girl and her brother. Even the old instrument seemed inspired. The young man and woman sat as if entranced by the magical, sweet sounds that flowed out upon the air in rhythmical swell and cadence, until, suddenly, the flame of the single candle wavered, sank, flickered, and went out. The shutters were thrown open, admitting a flood of brilliant moonlight, but the player paused, as if lost in thought. "Wonderful man," said the shoemaker in a low tone. "Who and what are you?" "Listen," replied the master, and he played the opening bars of the sonata in F. "Then you are Beethoven!" burst from the young people in delighted recognition. "Oh, play to us once more," they added as he rose to go. "Only once more." "I will improvise a sonata to the moonlight," said he, gazing thoughtfully upon the liquid stars shining so softly out of the depths of a cloudless winter sky. Then he played a sad and infinitely lovely movement, which crept gently over the instrument, like the calm flow of moonlight over the earth. This was followed by a wild, elfin passage in triple time, a sort of grotesque interlude, like the dance of fairies upon the lawn. Then came a swift agitated ending, a breathless, hurrying, trembling movement, descriptive of flight, and uncertainty, and vague impulsive terror, which carried us away on its rustling wings, and left us all in emotion and wonder. "Farewell to you," he said, as he rose and turned toward the door. "You will come again?" asked the host and hostess in a breath. "Yes, yes," said Beethoven hurriedly. "I will come again, and give the young lady some lessons. Farewell." Then to me he added, "Let us make haste back, that I may write out that sonata while I can yet remember it." We did return in haste, and not until long past the dawn of day did he rise from his table with the full score of the Moonlight Sonata in his hand. Michelangelo studied anatomy 12 years, nearly ruining his health, but this course determined his style, his practice, and his glory. He drew his figures in skeleton, added muscles, fat, and skin successively, and then draped them. He made every tool he used in sculpture, such as files, chisels, and pincers. In painting he prepared all his own colors, and would not let servants or students even mix them. Raphael's enthusiasm inspired every artist in Italy, and his modest, charming manners disarmed envy and jealousy. He has been called the only distinguished man who lived and died without an enemy or detractor. Again and again poor Bunyan might have had his liberty, but not the separation from his poor blind daughter Mary, which he said was like pulling the flesh from his bones, not the need of a poor family dependent upon him, not the love of liberty nor the spur of ambition could induce him to forego his plain preaching in public places. He had so forgotten his early education that his wife had to teach him again to read and write. It was the enthusiasm of conviction which enabled this poor, ignorant, despised Bedford tinker to write his immortal allegory with such fascination that a whole world has read it. Only thoughts that breathe in words that burn can kindle the spark slumbering in the heart of another. Rare consecration to a great enterprise is found in the work of the late Francis Parkman. While a student at Harvard, he determined to write the history of the French and English in North America. With a steadiness and devotion seldom equaled he gave his life, his fortune, his all to this one great object. Although he had, while among the Dakota Indians, collecting material for his history, ruined his health and could not use his eyes more than 5 minutes at a time for 50 years, he did not swerve a hair's breadth from the high purpose formed in his youth, until he gave to the world the best history upon the subject ever written. After Lincoln had walked 6 miles to borrow a grammar, he returned home and burned one shaving after another while he studied the precious prize. Gilbert Becket, an English crusader, was taken prisoner and became a slave in the palace of a Saracen prince, where he not only gained the confidence of his master, but also the love of his master's fair daughter. By and by he escaped and returned to England, but the devoted girl determined to follow him. She knew but 2 words of the English language, London and Gilbert, but by repeating the first she obtained passage in a vessel to the great metropolis, and then she went from street to street pronouncing the other, Gilbert. At last she came to the street on which Gilbert lived in prosperity. The unusual crowd drew the family to the window, when Gilbert himself saw and recognized her, and took to his arms and home his far-come princess with her solitary fond word. The most irresistible charm of youth is its bubbling enthusiasm. Youth sees no darkness ahead, no defile that has no outlet. It forgets that there is such a thing as failure in the world, and believes that mankind has been waiting all these centuries for him to come and be the liberator of truth and energy and beauty. Of what use was it to forbid the boy Handel to touch a musical instrument, or to forbid him going to school, lest he learn the gamut? He stole midnight interviews with a dumb spinet in a secret attic. The boy Bach copied whole books of studies by moonlight, for want of a candle churlishly denied. Nor was he disheartened when these copies were taken from him. The painter West began in a garret, and plundered the family cat for bristles to make his brushes. It is the enthusiasm of youth which cuts the Gordian knot age cannot untie. People smile at the enthusiasm of youth, says Charles Kingsley, that enthusiasm which they themselves secretly look back to with a sigh, perhaps unconscious that it is partly their own fault that they ever lost it. How much the world owes to the enthusiasm of Dante! Tennyson wrote his first volume at 18, and at 19 gained a medal at Cambridge. The most beautiful works of all art were done in youth, says Ruskin. Almost everything that is great has been done by youth, wrote Disraeli. The world's interests are, under God, in the hands of the young, says Dr. Trumbull. It was the youth Hercules that performed the 12 labors. Enthusiastic youth faces the sun, its shadows all behind it. The heart rules youth, the head, manhood. Alexander was a mere youth when he rolled back the Asiatic hordes that threatened to overwhelm European civilization almost at its birth. Napoleon had conquered Italy at 25. Byron and Raphael died at 37, an age which has been fatal to many a genius, and Poe lived but a few months longer. Romulus founded Rome at 20. Pitt and Bolingbroke were ministers almost before they were men. Gladstone was in Parliament in early manhood. Newton made some of his greatest discoveries before he was 25. Keats died at 25, Shelley at 29. Luther was a triumphant reformer at 25. It is said that no English poet ever equaled Chatterton at 21. Whitefield and Wesley began their great revival as students at Oxford, and the former had made his influence felt throughout England before he was 24. Victor Hugo wrote a tragedy at 15, and had taken 3 prizes at the Academy and gained the title of master before he was 20. Many of the world's greatest geniuses never saw 40 years. Never before has the young man, who is driven by his enthusiasm, had such an opportunity as he has today. It is the age of young men and young women. Their ardor is their crown, before which the languid and the passive bow. But if enthusiasm is irresistible in youth, how much more so is it when carried into old age? Gladstone at 80 had 10 times the weight and power that any man of 25 would have with the same ideals. The glory of age is only the glory of its enthusiasm, and the respect paid to white hairs is reverence to a heart fervent, in spite of the torpid influence of an enfeebled body. The Odyssey was the creation of a blind old man, but that old man was Homer. The contagious zeal of an old man, Peter the Hermit, rolled the chivalry of Europe upon the ranks of Islam. Dandolo, the Doge of Venice, won battles at 94 and refused a crown at 96. Wellington planned and superintended fortifications at 80. Bacon and Humboldt were enthusiastic students to the last gasp. Wise old Montaigne was shrewd in his graybeard wisdom and loving life, even in the midst of his fits of gout and colic. Dr. Johnson's best work, The Lives of the Poets, was written when he was 78. Defoe was 58 when he published Robinson Crusoe. Newton wrote new briefs to his Principia at 83. Plato died writing at 81. Tom Scott began the study of Hebrew at 86. Galileo was nearly 70 when he wrote on the laws of motion. James Watt learned German at 85. Mrs. Somerville finished her Molecular and Microscopic Science at 89. Humboldt completed his Cosmos at 90, a month before his death. Burke was 35 before he obtained a seat in Parliament, yet he made the world feel his character. Unknown at 40, Grant was one of the most famous generals in history at 42. Eli Whitney was 23 when he decided to prepare for college, and 30 when he graduated from Yale, yet his cotton gin opened a great industrial future for the southern states. What a power was Bismarck at 80. Lord Palmerston was an old boy to the last. He became Prime Minister of England the second time at 75, and died Prime Minister at 81. Galileo at 77, blind and feeble, was working every day, adapting the principle of the pendulum to clocks. George Stephenson did not learn to read and write until he had reached manhood. Some of Longfellow's, Whittier's, and Tennyson's best work was done after they were 70. At 63, Dryden began the translation of the Aeneid. Robert Hall learned Italian when past 60, that he might read Dante in the original. Noah Webster studied 17 languages after he was 50. Cicero said well that men are like wine. Age sours the bad and improves the good. With enthusiasm we may retain the youth of the spirit until the hair is silvered, even as the Gulf Stream softens the rigors of northern Europe. How ages thine heart towards youth? If not, doubt thy fitness for thy work. Chapter 14, On Time, or the Triumph of Promptness. On the great clock of time there is but one word, now. Note the sublime precision that leads the Earth over a circuit of 500 millions of miles back to the solstice at the appointed moment without the loss of 1 second. No, not the millionth part of a second, for ages and ages of which it traveled that imperiled road, Edward Everett. Who cannot but see oftentimes how strange the threads of our destiny run? Oft it is only for a moment the favorable instant is presented. We miss it, and months and years are lost. By the street of By and by one arrives at the house of Nevert, Cervantes. Lose this day by loitering, Tea will be the same story tomorrow, and the next more dilatory. Let's take the instant by the forward top. Shakespeare. Haste, post, haste. Haste for thy life, was frequently written upon messages in the days of Henry VIII of England, with a picture of a courier swinging from a gibbet. Post offices were unknown, and letters were carried by government messengers subject to hanging if they delayed upon the road. Even in the old, slow days of stagecoaches, when it took a month of dangerous traveling to accomplish the distance we can now span in a few hours, unnecessary delay was a crime. One of the greatest gains civilization has made is in measuring and utilizing time. We can do as much in an hour today as they could in 20 hours 100 years ago. Delays have dangerous ends. Caesar's delay to read a message cost him his life when he reached the Senate House. Colonel Rahl, the Hessian commander at Trenton, was playing cards when a messenger brought a letter stating that Washington was crossing the Delaware. He put the letter in his pocket without reading it until the game was finished, when he rallied his men only to die just before his troops were taken prisoners. Only a few minutes' delay, but he lost honor, liberty, life. Success is the child of two very plain parents: punctuality and accuracy. There are critical moments in every successful life when if the mind hesitate or a nerve flinch, all will be lost. Immediately on receiving your proclamation, wrote Governor Andrew of Massachusetts to President Lincoln on May 3, 1861, we took up the war, and have carried on our part of it, in the spirit in which we believe the administration and the American people intend to act, namely, as if there were not an inch of red tape in the world. He had received a telegram for troops from Washington on Monday, April 15th. At 9 o'clock the next Sunday, he said, all the regiments demanded from Massachusetts are already either in Washington, or in Fortress Monroe, or on their way to the defense of the capital. The only question which I can entertain, he said, is what to do, and when that question is answered, the other is, what next to do. The whole period of youth, said Ruskin, is one essentially of formation, edification, instruction. There is not an hour of it but is trembling with destinies, not a moment of which, once past, the appointed work can ever be done again, or the neglected blow struck on the cold iron. Napoleon laid great stress upon that supreme moment, that nick of time, which occurs in every battle, to take advantage of which means victory, and to lose in hesitation means disaster. He said that he beat the Austrians because they did not know the value of 5 minutes, and it has been said that among the trifles that conspired to defeat him at Waterloo, the loss of a few moments by himself and Grouchy on the fatal morning was the most significant. Blucher was on time, and Grouchy was late. It was enough to send Napoleon to St. Helena, and to change the destiny of millions. It is a well-known truism that has almost been elevated to the dignity of a maxim, that what may be done at any time will be done at no time. The African Association of London wanted to send Ledyard, the traveler, to Africa, and asked when he would be ready to go. "Tomorrow morning," was the reply. John Jervis, afterwards Earl St. Vincent, was asked when he could join his ship, and replied, "Directly." Colin Campbell, appointed commander of the army in India, and asked when he could set out, replied without hesitation, "Tomorrow." The energy wasted in postponing until tomorrow a duty of today would often do the work. How much harder and more disagreeable, too, it is to do work which has been put off. What would have been done at the time with pleasure or even enthusiasm, after it has been delayed for days and weeks, becomes drudgery. Letters can never be answered so easily as when first received. Many large firms make it a rule never to allow a letter to lie unanswered overnight. Promptness takes the drudgery out of an occupation. Putting off usually means leaving off, and going to do becomes going undone. Doing a deed is like sowing a seed. If not done at just the right time, it will be forever out of season. The summer of eternity will not be long enough to bring to maturity the fruit of a delayed action. If a star or planet were delayed 1 second, it might throw the whole universe out of harmony. "There is no moment like the present," said Maria Edgeworth. Not only so, there is no moment at all, no instant force and energy, but in the present. The man who will not execute his resolutions when they are fresh upon him can have no hopes from them afterward. They will be dissipated, lost in the hurry and scurry of the world, or sunk in the slough of indolence. Cobbett said he owed his success to being always ready, more than to all his natural abilities combined. "To this quality I owed my extraordinary promotion in the army," said he. "If I had to mount guard at 10, I was ready at 9. Never did any man or anything wait 1 minute for me." "How," asked a man of Sir Walter Raleigh, Do you accomplish so much, and in so short a time? When I have anything to do, I go and do it, was the reply. The man who always acts promptly, even if he makes occasional mistakes, will succeed when a procrastinator, even if he have the better judgment, will fail. When asked how he managed to accomplish so much work, and at the same time attend to his social duties, a French statesman replied, "I do it simply by never postponing till tomorrow what should be done today." It was said of an unsuccessful public man that he used to reverse this process, his favorite maxim being never to do today what might be postponed till tomorrow. How many men have dawdled away their success and allowed companions and relatives to steal it away 5 minutes at a time? "Tomorrow, didst thou say?" asked Cotton. "Go to, I will not hear of it. Tomorrow. 'Tis a sharper who stakes his penury against thy plenty, who takes thy ready cash and pays thee naught but wishes, hopes, and promises, the currency of idiots. Tomorrow. It is a period nowhere to be found in all the hoary registers of time, unless perchance in the fool's calendar. Wisdom disclaims the word, nor holds society with those that own it. 'Tis fancy's child, and folly is its father, wrought of such stuffs as dreams are, and baseless as the fantastic visions of the evening. Oh, how many a wreck on the road to success could say, I have spent all my life in pursuit of tomorrow, being assured that tomorrow has some vast benefit or other in store for me. But his resolutions remained unshaken. Charles Reade continues in his story of Noah Skinner, the defaulting clerk, who had been overcome by a sleepy languor after deciding to make restitution. By and by, waking up from a sort of heavy doze, he took, as it were, a last look at the receipts and murmured, "My head, how heavy it feels!" But presently he roused himself, full of his penitent resolutions, and murmured again, brokenly, "I'll take it to Pembroke Street to-morrow. The morrow found him, and so did the detectives, dead. Tomorrow. It is the devil's motto. All history is strewn with its brilliant victims, the wrecks of half-finished plans and unexecuted resolutions. It is the favorite refuge of sloth and incompetency. Strike while the iron is hot, and make hay while the sun shines, are golden maxims. Very few people recognize the hour when laziness begins to set in. Some people it attacks after dinner, some after lunch, and some after 7 o'clock in the evening. There is in every person's life a crucial hour in the day, which must be employed instead of wasted if the day is to be saved. With most people the early morning hour becomes the test of the day's success. A person was once extolling the skill and courage of Mayenne in Henry's presence. "You are right," said Henry. "He is a great captain, but I have always 5 hours start of him." Henry rose at 4 in the morning, and Mayenne at about 10. This made all the difference between them. Indecision becomes a disease, and procrastination is its forerunner. There is only one known remedy for the victims of indecision, and that is prompt decision. Otherwise the disease is fatal to all success or achievement. He who hesitates is lost. A noted writer says that a bed is a bundle of paradoxes. We go to it with reluctance, yet we quit it with regret. We make up our minds every night to leave it early, but we make up our bodies every morning to keep it late. Yet most of those who have become eminent have been early risers. Peter the Great always rose before daylight. "I am," said he, "for making my life as long as possible, and therefore sleep as little as possible." Alfred the Great rose before daylight. In the hours of early morning Columbus planned his voyage to America, and Napoleon his greatest campaigns. Copernicus was an early riser, as were most of the famous astronomers of ancient and modern times. Bryant rose at 5, Bancroft at dawn, and nearly all our leading authors in the early morning. Washington, Jefferson, Webster, Clay, and Calhoun were all early risers. Daniel Webster used often to answer 20 to 30 letters before breakfast. Walter Scott was a very punctual man. This was the secret of his enormous achievements. He rose at 5. By breakfast time he had, as he used to say, broken the neck of the day's work. Writing to a youth who had obtained a situation and asked him for advice, he gave this counsel: "Beware of stumbling over a propensity which easily besets you from not having your time fully employed. I mean what the women call dawdling. Do instantly whatever is to be done, and take the hours of recreation after business, never before it." Not too much can be said about the value of the habit of rising early. 8 hours is enough sleep for any man. Very frequently 7 hours is plenty. After the 8th hour in bed, if a man is able, It is his business to get up, dress quickly, and go to work. "A singular mischance has happened to some of our friends," said Hamilton. "At the instant when he ushered them into existence, God gave them a work to do, and he also gave them a competence of time, so much that if they began at the right moment, and wrought with sufficient vigor, their time and their work would end together. But a good many years ago a strange misfortune befell them. A fragment of their allotted time was lost. They cannot tell what became of it, but sure enough, it has dropped out of existence, for just like two measuring lines laid alongside, the one an inch shorter than the other, their work and their time run parallel, but the work is always 10 minutes in advance of the time. They are not irregular. They are never too soon. Their letters are posted the very minute after the mail is closed. They arrive at the wharf just in time to see the steamboat off. They come in sight of the terminus precisely as the station gates are closing. They do not break any engagement or neglect any duty, but they systematically go about it too late, and usually too late by about the same fatal interval. Someone has said that promptness is a contagious inspiration. Whether it be an inspiration or an acquirement, it is one of the practical virtues of civilization. There is one thing that is almost as sacred as the marriage relation, that is, an appointment. A man who fails to meet his appointment, unless he has a good reason, is practically a liar, and the world treats him as such. "If a man has no regard for the time of other men," said Horace Greeley, "why should he have for their money? What is the difference between taking a man's hour and taking his $5? There are many men to whom each hour of the business day is worth more than $5. When President Washington dined at 4, new members of Congress invited to dine at the White House would sometimes arrive late, and be mortified to find the president eating. "My cook," Washington would say, "never asks if the visitors have arrived, but if the hour has arrived." When his secretary excused the lateness of his attendance by saying that his watch was too slow, Washington replied, "Then you must get a new watch, or I another secretary." Franklin said to a servant who was always late, but always ready with an excuse, "I have generally found that the man who is good at an excuse is good for nothing else." Napoleon once invited his marshals to dine with him, but, as they did not arrive at the moment appointed, he began to eat without them. They came in just as he was rising from the table. "Gentlemen," said he, "it is now past dinner, and we will immediately proceed to business." Blucher was one of the promptest men that ever lived. He was called Marshal Forward. John Quincy Adams was never known to be behind time. The Speaker of the House of Representatives knew when to call the House to order by seeing Mr. Adams coming to his seat. Once a member said that it was time to begin. "No," said another, "Mr. Adams is not in his seat." It was found that the clock was 3 minutes fast, and prompt to the minute, Mr. Adams arrived. Webster was never late at a recitation in school or college. In court, in Congress, in society, he was equally punctual. Amid the cares and distractions of a singularly busy life, Horace Greeley managed to be on time for every appointment. Many a trenchant paragraph for the Tribune was written while the editor was waiting for men of leisure, tardy at some meeting. Punctuality is the soul of business, as brevity is of wit. During the first 7 years of his mercantile career, Amos Lawrence did not permit a bill to remain unsettled over Sunday. Punctuality is said to be the politeness of princes. Some men are always running to catch up with their business. They are always in a hurry, and give you the impression that they are late for a train. They lack method, and seldom accomplish much. Every businessman knows that there are moments on which hang the destiny of years. If you arrive a few moments late at the bank, your paper may be protested and your credit ruined. One of the best things about school and college life is that the bell which strikes the hour for rising, for recitations, or for lectures, teaches habits of promptness. Every young man should have a watch which is a good timekeeper. One that is nearly right encourages bad habits, and is an expensive investment at any price. "Oh, how I do appreciate a boy who is always on time," says H.C. Brown. "How quickly you learn to depend on him, and how soon you find yourself entrusting him with weightier matters." The boy who has acquired a reputation for punctuality has made the first contribution to the capital that in after years makes his success a certainty. Promptness is the mother of confidence and gives credit. It is the best possible proof that our own affairs are well ordered and well conducted, and gives others confidence in our ability. The man who is punctual, as a rule, will keep his word, and may be depended upon. A conductor's watch is behind time, and a terrible railway collision occurs. A leading firm with enormous assets becomes bankrupt, simply because an agent is tardy in transmitting available funds, as ordered. An innocent man is hanged because the messenger bearing a reprieve should have arrived 5 minutes earlier. A man is stopped 5 minutes to hear a trivial story and misses a train or steamer by 1 minute. Grant decided to enlist the moment that he learned of the fall of Sumter. When Buckner sent him a flag of truce at Fort Donelson, asking for the appointment of commissioners to consider terms of capitulation, he promptly replied, "No terms except an unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted. I propose to move immediately upon your works." Buckner replied that circumstances compelled him to accept the ungenerous and unchivalrous terms which you propose. The man who, like Napoleon, can on the instant seize the most important thing and sacrifice the others, is sure to win. Many a wasted life dates its ruin from a lost 5 minutes. Too late can be read between the lines on the tombstone of many a man who has failed. A few minutes often makes all the difference between victory and defeat, success and failure. You've been listening to Pushing to the Front. Orison Swett Marden, Part 3. Thank you for joining the Winner's Voice. Part 4 will be available in the next video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful audiobooks.